We've learned from news reports today that 5 British soldiers were killed yesterday, and they were killed by someone who is not supposed to be their enemy. It was in southern Afghanistan, in Helmand province, at a checkpoint where Afghan and British soldiers served together. But without warning, one of the Afghan troops at that checkpoint opened fire on his supposed British allies, killing 5 of them. If this scenario sounds familiar, it may be because last month in Wardak province, 2 American troops were also killed by supposedly friendly fire as an Afghan policeman shot the Americans during what was supposed to be a joint patrol. The stated strategy of the U.S. military in Afghanistan now is to defeat the insurgency by protecting the people, by shoring up a legitimate state, by training and arming local security forces to be able to protect their own people and defend their own country. Here's one issue. What if those local forces want to defend their country from us or from their own government that they really don't see as legitimate? Last week, a Foreign Service officer and former Marine captain named Matthew Ho went public with his resignation from the U.S. State Department, making him the first U.S. official known to have resigned over the war in Afghanistan. His resignation letter said in part, quote, "I have lost understanding of and confidence in the strategic purposes of the United States presence in Afghanistan. To put it simply, I fail to see the value or the worth in continued U.S. casualties or expenditures of resources in support of the Afghan government in what is truly a 35-year-old civil war." Joining us now is Matthew Ho. Mr. Ho, thanks very much for coming on the show. It's nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
If Afghanistan is in a civil war, who's fighting each other and whose side have we taken?
Sure. This is very, very complex. It's difficult to talk about this in a forum such like this because it is very complex, and it took me a long time to figure this out, and it's taken other people a long time to figure out. However, basically what you have 2 sides in this conflict. One is an urban, secular, educated elite. The other is a poor, rural, religious, and traditional. We're on the former side, which also happens to be the same side that the Soviet Union was on when it had its own Afghan war. This is a civil war that's been going on for 35 years, and the only way to solve it is through political reconciliation.
Is our presence there helping the likelihood of political reconciliation or hindering it?
It would help it if we forced the Karzai government to do so. The Karzai government has no interest in reconciliation, but unfortunately, the U.S. policy has been for the last several years not to be involved in any reconciliation process.
What do you think would happen if we keep on with it? If our strategy doesn't change, if we maintain the same number of troops we've got now or even increase troops the way that's being proposed?
I think in 4 to 5 years, we're in the same situation right now. We may have stabilized the Afghan government to some extent by some measure or by some metric that we can demonstrate success. However, it won't end the civil war. And most importantly, though, it doesn't attain our 2 goals of defeating al-Qaeda and stabilizing Pakistan. And Pakistan should be our priority because of its nuclear weapons and its relationship with India.
So you think that if imagining us there for another 4 years or 5 years, any military harm that we could cause to the people who are essentially fighting the Afghan government would be offset by the continued recruiting advantages that we would offer by being there for that long and in as great a numbers as we're there?
Correct. Our presence fuels the insurgency. It's interesting you mentioned population control or securing the population. One of the things we used to talk about was how do one of the tenets of counterinsurgency is to separate the population from the insurgents or the insurgents from population. But how do you do that when the population are the insurgents? It's very difficult, and we have to recognize that we are on one side of a civil war, and we are only going to fuel the insurgency by our presence. We're fighting people who are fighting us because we're occupying them, and we're supporting a central government that they don't want.
You served as a Marine in Anbar province in Iraq, and you served with the U.S. State Department in Tikrit as well before coming to Afghanistan. Is that right?
Correct. I was actually a Department of Defense civilian assigned to a State Department team at Tikrit, and then we were embedded with the Army's 1st Infantry Division and the 42nd Infantry Division.
Okay. John McCain and others arguing for more troops in Afghanistan are explicitly citing Iraq, what happened in Iraq post-2006, as the reason why we should put more troops in Afghanistan. You have argued that the Iraq experience doesn't apply to Afghanistan. Having seen both, what do you think are what are the salient characteristics about Afghanistan that make the strategy not apply?
Sure. I mean, there are some similarities, but the differences are overwhelming. You have terrain differences, you have population differences, you have cultural differences. One of the key things we did during the surge was to do what we call population control, where we basically literally fenced people in. and then use biometrics and other methods to control the population to make sure we could catch the insurgents as they move from place to place. As well as in Baghdad, of course, we segregated the city so that they couldn't move freely between the different areas. That's not possible in Afghanistan. The population there lives, the rural population where the insurgency is based, lives spread out. It's like this peanut butter spread of villages across the countryside. And it just, so for that reason alone, population control won't work. But there are so many differences with the people, the culture, the enemy, the history, that you just can't take a cookie-cutter approach and just because it worked there, it will work there. It's just not feasible.
If we left, or if we pulled back drastically, you were most recently in Zabul province.
Correct.
I know you're the top-ranking U.S. civilian official there. What would happen in our wake if we left? What would be the effect in that province?
Oh, you know, this is difficult because I had Afghans who became my friends, and I worked daily with Afghan officials. I mean, we literally lived with each other. They lived right on the other side of our gate, and we lived in the city. And so it's difficult to say this, but there would be probably a bloodbath. There would be an increased amount of fighting. However, as difficult as to say this, because you do have some moral obligation to this, I believe our commander-in-chief, I believe our elected officials, I believe our nation has a higher obligation to our men and women in uniform to only commit them in combat when there is something of strategic value to the United States. And we don't have that in Afghanistan. We don't. It's not defeating al-Qaeda, and it's not stabilizing the region, our presence there.
Matthew Ho, former Marine Corps captain, political officer with the U.S. Foreign Service. Your resignation has been a real clarion call to a lot of people. Thank you for speaking out. I know this has been a difficult thing for you to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.